A young girl named Amara makes a simple choice in the park to share her sandwich with a stranger. But what she doesn't know is that this small act of kindness is about to set off a series of events that will change her life, and his, in ways no one could have imagined. Who is this mysterious man? And what secrets will be uncovered by this chance encounter? Watch until the end to find out how one moment of compassion leads to a twist that will leave you speechless. Before we continue this incredible story, please hit like and subscribe to stay inspired. The chill of late autumn hung in the air, mingling with the earthy scent of fallen leaves and the distant sounds of children's laughter. The city park was alive with activity, a vibrant tapestry of joggers, families, and dog walkers. Amidst the noise and bustle, 10-year-old Amara found a quiet spot on her favorite bench under a towering oak tree. She liked this bench. It felt like a little secret corner of the world where she could watch the city come alive, a world that seemed so big and full of possibilities. Amara was a bright-eyed girl with curly hair pulled back into a messy ponytail, her warm brown skin glowing under the soft sunlight filtering through the branches. She wore a worn but clean pink jacket, slightly too big for her, with patches her mother had lovingly sewn on to cover the wear and tear. In her small hands, she held a neatly wrapped sandwich, a peanut butter and jelly, her favorite. Her mother, Evelyn, always made sure to pack an extra sandwich, not just because Amara often got hungry after school, but because Evelyn believed in teaching her daughter the importance of sharing, even when they didn't have much themselves. "You never know who might need a little kindness," Evelyn would say, her voice tinged with the wisdom of someone who had seen both good and hard times. Amara opened the sandwich wrapper slowly, savoring the smell of the sweet jelly and the salty peanut butter. But just as she was about to take a bite, her eyes wandered to a figure sitting on a bench a little further down. The man was older, maybe in his 60s, with a thick gray beard and disheveled hair that fell in wild tangles. His clothes were dirty and frayed, and his eyes stared blankly at the ground, as if he were lost in a world of his own. Amara watched him for a moment. There was something about the way he sat, so still and quiet, that tugged at her heart. The man looked out of place, like he didn't belong to this park, or maybe even this world. Without thinking much of it, Amara got up, her small feet crunching on the leaves as she made her way over to him. "Hi," she said, her voice gentle but clear. The man looked up, startled, his blue eyes meeting her brown ones. He looked tired, not just physically, but deep in his soul. "Would you like half of my sandwich? It's peanut butter and jelly. My mom makes them really good," Amara offered, holding out the wrapped half with a shy smile. The man hesitated, his gaze shifting from the sandwich to Amara's earnest face. It had been so long since anyone had offered him anything with kindness. His hands trembled slightly as he reached out, taking the sandwich as if it were a precious gift. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice hoarse. He hadn't spoken to anyone in days. Amara sat down next to him, swinging her legs back and forth. They ate in silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. There was a quiet understanding between them, a silent acknowledgement that, in this moment, they were sharing more than just a sandwich. "What's your name?" Amara asked after a while, her curiosity getting the better of her. The man paused, his mind searching for an answer that felt just out of reach. "George," he finally said, though it came out like a question more than a statement. "Nice to meet you, George." "I'm Amara," she said brightly. "Do you come here a lot?" George nodded vaguely, though he didn't remember how long he'd been wandering these streets or why he ended up in this park today. His memories were a blur, flashes of faces, places, and feelings that didn't quite fit together. But today, sitting beside Amara, something felt different. He didn't feel invisible anymore. Amara's life was simple yet filled with little routines that brought her joy. After school, she would stop by the corner store, where Mr. Patel would give her a warm smile and sometimes sneak her a piece of candy. Then, she'd head to the park, her favorite place to unwind and watch the world go by. She liked to imagine stories about the people she saw: a mother chasing after her toddler, an elderly couple taking their afternoon walk, a group of teenagers skating near the fountain. But lately, her thoughts kept drifting to George. After their first encounter, Amara looked for George every day. At first, she thought maybe he was just passing through and wouldn't be there again. But there he was, sitting on the same bench, looking a little cleaner but still lost. He never asked for anything, never bothered anyone. He simply sat there, wrapped in his thoughts and a coat that was far too thin for the cold weather. "Hi, George," Amara called out cheerfully as she approached, holding 2 sandwiches in her small hands. "I brought you another sandwich. Today it's turkey and cheese. My mom made it special." George's eyes brightened when he saw her. There was something refreshing about Amara's presence, something innocent and kind that cut through the fog in his mind. He didn't know why this little girl kept bringing him food, but he was grateful. No one had shown him kindness like this in a long time. "Thank you, Amara," he said, accepting the sandwich with a soft smile. He was starting to remember her name, starting to look forward to their daily exchanges. Amara plopped down next to him, unwrapping her own sandwich. "So, what do you like to do, George? Do you have any hobbies?" she asked, swinging her legs back and forth, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. George thought for a moment, searching the foggy corners of his mind. He used to like reading, didn't he? Or maybe it was hiking. His thoughts were fragmented, like pieces of a puzzle that didn't quite fit together anymore. I used to like reading, I think. But I don't remember much," he admitted, a touch of sadness in his voice. Amara didn't pry. Instead, she started talking about her day, about school, her favorite books, and how her mom was trying to save up to start a small bakery business one day. George listened, finding comfort in the sound of her voice, even if he didn't fully follow every story. As the days turned into weeks, Amara's daily visits became a lifeline for George. She was a bright spot in his otherwise gray world, and her chatter slowly brought a sense of normalcy to his days. She didn't treat him like he was invisible, and she didn't look at him with pity. She simply saw him as George, a friend who shared her afternoons. Amara's kindness began to chip away at the walls George had built around himself. He started sharing little bits about his life, though his memories were scattered and disjointed. He talked about how he loved apple pie, how he remembered the smell of fresh-cut grass in the summertime, and how he used to live somewhere nice, though he couldn't quite recall where. One chilly afternoon, as they sat together watching the leaves fall, George turned to Amara with a more serious expression. "Amara, why are you so nice to me? You don't even know me." Amara shrugged, her eyes thoughtful. "My mom always says that it doesn't cost anything to be kind. And you looked like you could use a friend." She paused, then added, "Besides, everyone deserves to have someone who cares." George was moved by her words. It had been a long time since he'd felt like anyone cared. He was a ghost in the city, unseen and unheard, until Amara. She made him feel human again, and that feeling was priceless. One crisp Saturday morning, Amara arrived at the park, bundled up in her jacket and scarf. She spotted George on his usual bench, but today he seemed different, less distant, more present. As she got closer, she noticed him staring intently at something in his hands. It was a photograph, creased and faded, but still clear enough to see. "What's that?" Amara asked, leaning in to get a better look. George hesitated, staring at the picture as if trying to remember why it was so important. It showed a younger version of himself, standing beside a woman and 2 teenagers, a boy and a girl. They were all dressed nicely, smiling at the camera in front of a large, elegant house. The image was like a snapshot from a different life, a life that felt impossibly far away now. I don't know," George admitted, his voice tinged with confusion and sadness. "I found it in my coat pocket a while ago, but I don't remember them. I think they're my family." Amara studied the photo, noting the resemblance between George and the boy in the picture. The family looked happy, the kind of happy that felt almost foreign to the man she'd come to know. There was something about the way George looked at the photo that made Amara's heart ache. He seemed so lost, like someone who'd been wandering in the dark for too long. "Do you remember anything about them? Like their names, or where this picture was taken?" Amara asked gently. George shook his head. "Bits and pieces, but nothing clear. I just know that I miss them. Whoever they are, I feel like I belong with them." Amara thought for a moment, her mind racing with possibilities. She knew her mom would want to see this photo. Evelyn always watched the news and kept up with stories about missing people. Maybe there was a way to help George remember. "Can I take this picture to my mom?" She's really smart, and maybe she can help, Amara suggested, her eyes wide with hope. George hesitated, his fingers tracing the worn edges of the photograph. It was the only link he had to a past that felt unreachable, but something in Amara's earnestness made him trust her. Slowly, he handed the picture over. Okay, but please be careful with it. It's all I have. Amara nodded solemnly, carefully folding the photograph and tucking it into her jacket pocket. She could feel the weight of George's trust, and she was determined not to let him down. That evening, Amara sat at the kitchen table, her legs swinging under the chair as Evelyn prepared dinner. The kitchen was small but cozy, filled with the warm smells of garlic and herbs. Evelyn, with her hair tied up in a colorful scarf, moved with a kind of graceful efficiency, stirring a pot of soup while keeping an eye on the bread baking in the oven. "Mom, can I show you something?" Amara asked, her voice tinged with excitement and a bit of nervousness. Evelyn turned, wiping her hands on her apron. "Of course, sweetie. What's on your mind?" Amara pulled out the photo and handed it to her mother. Evelyn took it, her brow furrowing as she studied the image. "Who are these people?" "That's George," Amara explained, pointing to the man in the picture. "He's the one I've been telling you about, the one I bring sandwiches to. He doesn't remember who he is, but he thinks this might be his family." Evelyn's expression shifted from curiosity to something deeper. She recognized the face, not just because of Amara's stories, but because it was familiar in a way she couldn't quite place. She had seen this man's face before, maybe on a missing persons flyer or on the news. The name escaped her, but the story didn't. "This man, I think he's been missing for a long time," Evelyn said quietly, her eyes never leaving the photo. "I remember seeing something about him a few months ago. A businessman who went missing after a car accident. The family was looking for him everywhere." Amara's heart leapt. Could George really be that man? Could he have a family out there searching for him, missing him just as much as he missed them? "What do we do, Mom? Can we help him?" Amara asked, her voice brimming with hope. Evelyn looked at her daughter, her heart swelling with pride and love. Amara's kindness had led them to this moment, and Evelyn knew they had to do something. "Yes, baby, we can help. I'll make a few calls tomorrow. We'll see if we can find someone who knows this man and get him back to where he belongs." That night, as Amara lay in bed, she couldn't stop thinking about George and the possibility that her small act of kindness could lead to something so big. She whispered a little prayer for him, hoping that soon he would find his way back to the people he loved. The following morning, Evelyn woke up early, her mind racing with thoughts about George and the photo Amara had brought home. She brewed herself a strong cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen table, her laptop open to a search engine. She typed in keywords that she hoped would lead her to George's story: missing businessman, car accident, family searching. She sifted through countless articles, her determination unwavering. After an hour of searching, she found it. A news article from several months ago featuring a story about a wealthy man named George Caldwell, a successful entrepreneur who had gone missing after a severe car accident. The article detailed how he had disappeared without a trace after being released from the hospital, suffering from what doctors suspected was a form of dissociative amnesia due to the trauma of the accident. The accompanying photo was unmistakable. It was George, the same man Amara had been sharing her sandwiches with. Evelyn's heart pounded as she read about George's wife, Ellen, and their two children, Patrick and Lily, who had been tirelessly searching for him, organizing community efforts, and putting up flyers all over the city. It was a heartbreaking story of a family left in limbo, clinging to the hope that one day George would come back to them. Evelyn quickly jotted down the contact number listed at the end of the article. She felt a sense of urgency. This was their chance to help George find his way home. She glanced over at Amara, who was sitting at the table, quietly eating her cereal, her eyes full of questions. "Is it really him, Mom?" Amara asked, her voice trembling with anticipation. Evelyn nodded, a mix of excitement and cautious optimism in her eyes. "I think so, baby. I'm going to call them now. Let's hope they're still looking for him." Evelyn dialed the number, her hands shaking slightly. After a few rings, a woman's voice answered, weary but polite. "Hello, this is Ellen Caldwell." Evelyn took a deep breath. "Hello, my name is Evelyn, And I believe I have some information about your husband, George. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Ellen's voice, suddenly laced with a mix of hope and fear, asked, Do you know where he is? Is he okay? Evelyn explained everything, how her daughter had met George in the park, the sandwich sharing, and the gradual unfolding of George's story, including the discovery of the photograph. Ellen listened, her breath hitching as she processed the information. There were tears in her voice as she thanked Evelyn profusely and promised to come to the park that afternoon with her children, hoping beyond hope that this wasn't just another dead end. Amara and Evelyn sat on their usual bench, waiting nervously. Amara kept glancing down the path, her small hands fidgeting with the hem of her jacket. She couldn't quite believe that today might be the day George would find his family again. She was excited, but also anxious. What if George didn't remember them? What if he didn't want to go back? Evelyn spotted a woman approaching, flanked by a teenage boy and girl. Ellen Caldwell looked elegant yet exhausted, her eyes red-rimmed from sleepless nights and months of worry. Her son, Patrick, was tall and athletic, but he walked with his shoulders slumped, as if the weight of the past months had aged him beyond his years. Lily, the youngest, clutched her mother's arm, her expression a mix of hope and fear. As the Caldwell family neared, Amara spotted George sitting at the far end of the park, in his usual spot. She quickly ran over to him, breathless with excitement. George, there's someone here who wants to see you. George looked up, confusion flickering across his face. He followed Amara's gaze and saw the group standing a short distance away, watching him with a mix of anticipation and heartbreak. His eyes locked onto Ellen's, and something inside him shifted. It was like a key turning in a lock that had been jammed for far too long. George! Ellen cried out, her voice cracking as she rushed forward. She stopped just short of him, as if afraid that touching him might break whatever fragile connection had brought him back into her life. George stared at her, his mind racing. Her face was familiar. The curve of her smile, the way her eyes shimmered with tears. It all came rushing back in fragmented bursts, flashes of family dinners, laughter, and long walks by the beach. He remembered their wedding day, Patrick's first soccer game, Lily's laughter as he pushed her on a swing. The fog in his mind began to clear, and he recognized them not just as strangers, but as his family. Ellen? George whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Patrick. Lily. Ellen reached out, tears streaming down her face. She touched his cheek, almost as if she was trying to confirm he was real. It's really you, she sobbed. We've been looking everywhere for you. Patrick and Lily joined their mother, embracing their father with desperate, tearful hugs. George held them tightly, overwhelmed by the flood of memories and emotions. It was a moment of pure, raw joy, the kind that felt almost surreal, as if they were all dreaming and afraid to wake up. Amara watched from a distance, tears welling up in her eyes. She didn't fully understand the weight of what was happening, but she knew that this was something special, something bigger than anything she'd ever experienced. She glanced at her mom, who was also wiping away tears, moved by the reunion she had helped make possible. After a few moments, Ellen turned to Amara and Evelyn, her expression full of gratitude. Thank you, she said, her voice choked with emotion. You brought him back to us. I don't know how to thank you enough. Amara smiled shyly, her cheeks warm with pride. I'm just glad he found you. In the weeks that followed, George slowly began to reintegrate into his old life. The memories were still patchy, but with his family's support, he was healing. He often thought about the park and the little girl with the big heart who had helped him when no one else would. George made it a point to visit Amara and Evelyn, bringing gifts and spending time with them as a way to show his gratitude. One Sunday afternoon, George invited Amara and Evelyn to his home for dinner. The Caldwell residence was grand, with a sweeping driveway and beautifully manicured gardens. Amara marveled at the house, feeling like she had stepped into a different world. But George made sure they felt welcome, insisting that their kindness was the reason he was standing there today. As they gathered around the dining table, Ellen raised a toast, her voice warm and grateful. To Amara and Evelyn, who reminded us that even the smallest acts of kindness can change the course of someone's life. After dinner, George and Ellen pulled Evelyn aside. They had been talking about how they could show their appreciation in a way that would truly honor what Amara had done for them. They knew Evelyn was working hard to make ends meet, juggling multiple jobs while trying to give Amara the best life she could. "We'd like to help you start that bakery you've always dreamed of," Ellen said, her eyes sincere. "It's the least we can do after all you've done for George." Evelyn was stunned. She had never imagined her dream could come true so suddenly. Tears filled her eyes as she tried to find the words to express her gratitude. "I don't know what to say. This is more than I could have ever hoped for." George smiled. "You and Amara gave me back my family. This is just a small way of saying thank you." But that wasn't all. Patrick and Lily, inspired by their father's story, had started a charity initiative focused on helping the homeless. They invited Amara to be a part of it, giving her a chance to share her story of how a simple sandwich had changed everything. Amara, now surrounded by new opportunities, continued to excel in school. The Caldwells also set up a scholarship fund in her name, ensuring that she would have the resources to pursue any dream she had. It was a gesture that cemented the bond between the families, a reminder of how far-reaching a small act of kindness could be. Months later, Amara stood in the park once more, her favorite spot beneath the towering oak tree. Life had changed so much since that first day she had shared her sandwich with George. Her mom's bakery was thriving, and Amara was doing well in school, surrounded by new friends and opportunities she had never thought possible. George often visited the park, now with a sense of peace and gratitude. He would bring his family along, and together, they would sit on the same bench where he and Amara first met. It was a place that held memories of struggle, but also of hope and redemption. As Amara looked out at the city bustling around her, she thought about all the little things that had led to this moment. A sandwich, a smile, a simple act of reaching out when it would have been easier to walk away. She realized that kindness didn't need to be grand or perfect, it just needed to be genuine. Amara closed her eyes, feeling the crisp autumn breeze on her face. She knew that her small gesture had sparked something extraordinary, setting off a chain of events that would forever bind her life to George's. And as she opened her eyes and saw George waving at her from across the park, she knew one thing for sure. Even the smallest seeds of kindness could grow into something beautiful. It was a lesson she would carry with her always, a reminder that every act of compassion, no matter how small, has the power to change the world.